Welcome to Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. I'm Kristin Fields-Chadwick, your podcast coach on this transformative podcasting journey. Our mission, empower Kingdom entrepreneurs to confidently launch and grow podcasts, fostering a journey of being seen, being heard, being known, and making a lasting kingdom impact. This is Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. Your voice matters. Hey podcasters, I'm your host and your podcast coach, Kristin Chadwick, and today we are going to be talking about imposter syndrome. We see it everywhere. I've read articles, I've seen books, I've heard it talked about many times. However, I loved this conversation with my friend, John Mollura, who is a speaker, a coach, a photographer. And this is where I was like, you need to share your story inside of podcast coaching, because the way that he starts to break through imposter syndrome is so personal to his own faith journey, to his story, and it's going to help you, whether you're hesitating starting that podcast or you are podcasting and you are starting to hear those lies from the enemy of who do you think you are to put a podcast out there. Or maybe it's the next step of you're starting to do lives or YouTubes or whatever, speaking or writing a book. This episode is for you. Now, John is a speaker, he's a coach, he's a photographer, and fun fact, this is really cool. He used to work for NASA as one of the top systems test engineers. And you're going to hear his story about even though he was at the top of the top of the top, he felt this imposter syndrome. And I wanted to have him share some of the wisdom on the subject to help my podcasters. Because if he is able, and if he was experiencing imposter syndrome, like many other celebrities that we know, like Billie Eilish has talked about it. I think he talks about Oprah Winfrey, or there's Tom Hanks is another one that talks about imposter syndrome. And John experienced imposter syndrome even as a NASA systems test engineer. So if you are experiencing imposter syndrome, my friend, you are not alone. And today's episode is really cool because he is going to be talking about his Saul to Paul moment and a beautiful moment of surrender where he hits rock bottom, and he talks about how Jesus was his rock bottom. So I can't wait for you to hear that. At the end of our conversation, he's going to give you 2 tools to walk away with for free on how to start to overcome this imposter syndrome. And you guys, the tools that he gives are so crucial, and it was even new to me, and I know that it's going to help you. So stay tuned to hear those 2 tools that he gives and shares with us. Super simple to implement, and it's a game changer. All right, one more thing before we head into the episode. You're going to hear me mention a few things. Number 1, you're going to hear me talk about my podcast members. Some of you don't know, but I have a podcast membership where it is a monthly membership for group coaching with me, your podcast expert. I've been in this industry since 2016, and I love staying up to date to know what's helping us grow, what's helping us monetize, what's helping us launch, what's the latest social media, what's the latest tech. All of those things are covered every month inside of our membership. You get group coaching, you get Voxer back pocket coaching. So anytime you have a question, you can Voxer me, which is like a walkie-talkie. And you guys, it is so incredibly affordable. So if you're interested, we're going to put a link down below. You can check it out and reach out to me if that sounds like something that you want to do. Doing podcasting can be lonely. So I really, really encourage you, if you are a podcaster and you are not a part of a group, accountability, mentorship, coaching, come and check this out. It's totally worth the investment every month. The second thing that I mentioned inside of this episode, or you'll hear him talk about, is Brand Builders Group. Now, Brand Builders Group is something that I chose to invest in back in the fall. Y'all, it is like going to school for a master's degree in marketing and personal branding. And it's going to come out inside of that membership that I just talked about, just all the tools that I've been learning. But if you wanted to dig in personally to your own personal brand, I highly recommend checking out Brand Builders Group. There's a link below, a referral link. I have loved it. It is so full of practical tools to build your personal brand. So check those two things out. All right. Now, for an encouraging and inspiring story on faith and imposter syndrome and actually walking away with 2 tools that are going to help you overcome your own imposter syndrome, let's take a listen. Okay. So we're jumping right into this conversation of imposter syndrome because I know you have so much wisdom to bring to this table. And many of my podcasters right now, as this is airing, they're right at the very beginning of the process of producing a podcast, creating their podcast. And then there are my podcast members and listeners who have been doing this for 2-3 years, and they're stuck. Maybe they're hitting this wall, this ceiling of like, oh gosh, I don't know if I could go here on my next step. So I'm so excited for you to talk about imposter syndrome today, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, and it's always a pleasure to share the hard-earned wisdom as you talked about with imposter syndrome, because I didn't know what it was for many years. That just innate feeling of feeling like a fake.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
Despite,
unpack that.
yeah, absolutely. So imposter syndrome at its core, it's related to self-doubt. And it manifests itself in a number of ways, but the primary way, the one that most people are familiar with, is you feel like a fake, despite accomplishments, awards, accolades, degrees, nice things people say to you. You just really feel like you're pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. And a lot of people, myself included, felt like this house, you've built this house of cards.
Mhm. Yeah,
And it's
totally.
just going to come tumbling down, as soon as someone finds out that you're not as, smart, witty, funny, insightful as everyone tells you you are.
Right. Yes. And it can happen to both men and women, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the data when they've talked to people, it says, at some point in people's lives, it affects up to 70% of people. And
Wow.
yeah, yeah. And obviously, some people it affects more severely and on a deeper level. And those are the people that I really like working with. But people that maybe experience imposter syndrome severely, they're actually in pretty good company because it affects disproportionately high amounts of high performers.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. All right. So tell me more on
Yeah.
that because I feel like I resonate with that. And I know many other people do too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll share my story, but just know before I jump in, like, lots of celebrities have wrestled with it. Tom Hanks, Reese Witherspoon, despite your whatever your listener's persuasion is on Kim Kardashian, she operates at a very high level in entertainment world. Have wrestled with imposter syndromes and these feelings like a fake. But I'll back up and tell my story. So, as you mentioned in the intro, for 15 years, I used to lead test operations for NASA projects and missions, and then also test operations for Department of Defense and also Homeland Security. So some of it very high profile, some of it designed not to be high profile, but the stakes were always very high, whether it was financial or with security, for either our service members or the general public. And I carried a lot of that weight and I didn't know how to carry it properly. And I just always felt, especially when I came into the job right out of college after graduating with an engineering degree, I very quickly, as my mentor Skip used to say, bubbled to the top
Hmm.
because they would they would throw us right into it. Like I showed up for my first day at work right out of college. I had, my khakis on and button down shirt and a tie. And I think that was probably the last time I wore a tie for the next 15 years because our group was tasked with testing things at the system level to make sure they did what they were supposed to do before they landed on Mars or got loaded, onto a service member in a fighter jet. So I showed up in my shirt and tie and sat down at my desk, and they showed me how to log into my email, and then they put me in a van and sent me to an airport and flew me to a government test site. I was there by dinner time. And
Woo.
that pretty much summed up the next 15 years of my life. And I quickly rose to the top in that. I could hang in that high speed environment, and all of a sudden got all these tasks issued to me. At one point, I was in charge of a landing system for a Mars lander for the British. And I was like 24. And this
Crazy.
isn't imposter syndrome talking. This is wisdom looking back.
You're right.
The way I should have been in charge of that. But it really caused a lot of angst. I didn't know how to handle that. And like I said, being a child of the 80s and 90s, and especially a male, like, we weren't taught that vocabulary to talk about how we were feeling,
Right.
especially operating in the environment I did when I started there in 2001. It was very much the mentality of suck it up, buttercup.
Yes. Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
and it really caused a lot of the demons of anxiety that I had wrestled with all through my life, from a little guy, from unprocessed trauma. Again, I didn't have the vocabulary to describe that.
Yeah.
So I found myself on paper very successful at my career. Like, you can see behind me, those are like letters of commendation from the military, and mission patches for Mars and Antarctica stuff when we were down there. But I was robbed of so much joy,
Mm.
Kristin, because I didn't believe those accolades. I didn't believe I was supposed to get that letter of commendation. Like, I actually was standing on stage to receive that letter that's hanging behind me. And I just remember having this upwelling of fear, like, they're going to find out I totally faked my way through this, and they're going to pull this letter of commendation from me in front of everybody, and the jig is finally going to be up.
Wow.
So for years, that's just how I operated until I learned about imposter syndrome, probably about 10 years ago now. I was traveling for a project for a NASA mission, and my coworker, who was very sage and very wise, saw a flyer hanging at Jet Propulsion Laboratory and said, "Oh, they're doing a presentation on imposter syndrome."
Hmm.
I'm like, "What are you talking about, Lori? Like,
What are you saying?
what planet are you on, dude?" And she explained, she said, "Well, imposter syndrome is when you feel like a fake despite, you know, all the evidence to the contrary." And I'm like, it like stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, wait a minute.
Oh,
I mean, everybody doesn't feel like that. And she said, "Well, that's that's not the way you want to feel." I said, "But I just thought that's the way it was."
wow.
And, as I was going through my own journey, which, I'm happy to unpack, which involves, very intertwined with faith, as I was healing and learning about myself and just unpacking all of this stuff that had been pushed down for so long in my life. Imposter syndrome is something that I really dug into. So I got to the point now where I can turn the volume down of it.
Yeah.
That little voice starts chirping and telling me I'm not worthy, or I don't have what it takes. I've developed a lot of skills and tactics to turn that volume down.
That's so beautiful. And I love that you mentioned faith. This is a faith forward podcast. So
Mhm.
I think it would be really helpful for someone who is struggling with imposter syndrome. What
Yeah.
were the steps that you had this awareness of like, oh, there's actually a name for what I feel on the daily? And how did you unpack that with your faith?
Yeah, so the the unpacking of it with my faith, get that rewinds very far back. And I share this story on Faith Forward podcast or not, because we're called to serve the kingdom and spread the message, and you never know who you're going to touch. So I have a very Saul to Paul story. Some of the parts of it I'm definitely not proud of and wish I could change, but it's part of my story. So I was raised in a Catholic household, and we went to church and did all the things. And I played guitar in the worship team. And we thought we were very good Christians because we didn't give anyone the middle finger leaving the parking lot on Sundays. That was like our barometer. I went to Catholic high school. I transferred into Catholic high school, and I was having a lot of emotional issues. Then started in late middle school, but again, didn't know how to talk about that.
Mm.
My kids now, I have 3 school age kids. They have like counseling classes. where they learn breathing technique. And this is like the public school. It's not like they go to some like, fancy
Same
private.
with
Yeah.
my
They're like our private school teaches kids breathing techniques and conflict management. That didn't happen, especially like in an old school Catholic high school. So I went through high school and struggled a lot, fell in with the crowd that didn't always make the best decisions. Sometimes there's some pretty bad decisions. And when I graduated high school, I had seen so much hypocrisy and things that just weren't in alignment
yeah.
with what I knew was just right as a human. I not only left religion, Kristen, I like stiff armed it.
Mm,
So if I would have heard anyone, mention faith or how they rely on Christ or they're kingdom focused, like I would say things like, "What, you're not strong enough to do life on your own?"
mm,
Like that probably would have been something I would have said to you, you know, 20 years ago.
yeah.
And the irony of saying that is I was falling apart inside,
Wow.
just
Mm,
just riddled with anxiety and panic attacks. And that's how I operated through college, the beginning part of my corporate career, and kind of had a 1-2 punch occur after I had graduated college after about 7 years. I was about halfway through my engineering career at this point. We had our first child, and one of my core fears was I was always going to disappoint those that cared for me,
mm,
or that cared and depended on me.
yeah.
And so here I am with this like little like 5.5 pound baby, and my wife left for the first time to like go to Walmart or something. She
Mhm.
said if if she wakes up, just give her a bottle. I'll be back in like an hour and a half. I just need some time to myself. And I said, all right, cool, I got this. I land things on Mars, for goodness sakes. I can handle it. Well, my daughter woke up. First time I'd been alone with her first child, and she wouldn't take the bottle. And I just had this like just a panic attack of that
Oh,
voice saying like, "Yep, see, look, you're not going to be able to take care of your kid. All these fears of fatherhood and everything that you have, and not being able to cut it and disappointing it, you're disappointing your kids and passing on traumas and hurt. Here you go. This is it. You blew it out of the gate."
wow.
So that started, like near continual low grade panic attacks for months, saddled with, increased responsibilities at work. Like I was in Antarctica for a period of that time and was just riddled with anxiety and really missed out on a lot of the experience. Like I didn't not do things, but like during it, like I just had these just,
Yeah.
you know, just riddled with anxious thoughts. And then a few months after that, one of my best childhood friends who I looked up to like a big brother completed suicide.
Mm,
And it just rocked me to my core. I didn't know what to do. Like I was a problem solver. Like that's what I did for a living. And I couldn't figure out how to like shake myself out of this fog. And I can remember my wife and daughter were gone. I was getting ready for work and I'm like, I don't know how to handle this. Wait, I don't know how to go on. My coping mechanisms aren't working, which I'm sure you'd be shocked to hear they were not always healthy coping mechanisms.
huh, yeah.
Um, I don't know how to go on. I don't know if I want to go on. Like, I don't know what to do.
Mm,
And in that moment, I said the strength, courage, and wisdom prayer.
mm,
I mean, strength is stuff I can, wisdom, to know the difference. As soon as I said the wisdom to know the difference, I just had this warm sensation flow over me from head to toe.
wow.
And I thought, either A, I've just actually lost my mind and cracked up, or B, maybe there's something to this God thing.
Mm,
And I haven't been proven wrong that it was not option B. The Holy Spirit, I now realize, flowing into me. And I used to say that's the moment where mercy found me, but that's not actually true. That was the moment where I let mercy flow into me
ooh,
because I was so broken. I was
mm,
just so broken. And I just, Jesus was always there, always wanted to be with me. And that was the moment where I actually allowed him in. And that was in 2009. And that led me first to really evaluate myself, how I was showing up in the world. And I know this is a Faith Forward podcast, so I'll just leave it that I was a big jerk. I
Mm.
usually like to use another adjective for how I used to treat people.
Bleep,
But
bleep, bleep.
yeah, blankety blank blank like cotton head and ninny mug, and we're close to Christmas. um, but yeah, I started, like I said, I was a test engineer. My life revolved around data. So I started getting data on myself. Like, how am I showing up in the world? How am I treating people? And I was like, oh, brother, you're defending this like veneer of perfection that you've created with
Mhm.
just sarcasm and mean comments just to push people away because I was so worried about being wounded.
Mm.
I thought I'll push them away on my terms. I'm not going to give anyone a chance to hurt me like I've been hurt in the past.
Mhm.
And just, through faith and prayer and learning more about myself and grace, just really did a 180, from hitting rock bottom. I
Yeah.
found my rock at rock bottom, which was Jesus.
Mm. Wow, that's a powerful statement right there.
Yeah.
So, coming back to the imposter syndrome, what was the intersection there in the timing of kind of working through both of those together?
Yeah. So I didn't learn about imposter syndrome probably for another 4 years, which was
Okay.
the time I needed just to get myself on some level footing and repair relationships, mend relationships, start seeing myself differently,
Mm.
start giving myself grace that I would give out to other people so abundantly. Yeah,
Mm.
I would give myself a lot of grace. So once I learned about imposter syndrome, it was always kind of in the back of my mind. And then it really accelerated me learning about it and how like things I've done. I'm like, well, I don't feel like I'm a fake anymore.
Mm.
I left engineering in 2017 and pursued photography full time. So after doing photography full time for a couple of years, I was like, I actually feel like I have what it takes. Because I always used to roll up to every shoot and I'm thinking, this is it. This is going to be the one. This is going to be the one where I can't pull it off, and they're going to find out I've just been faking it the whole time. Despite National Geographic featured my work one time.
So cool.
Yeah, yeah, it was very cool when that happened, but still, like, for years, I would, be like, "Yep, this is probably gonna be the one where I just screw it all up." And
Mhm.
then I realized those feelings has kind of gone away,
Yeah.
and I was asked by someone in the same group where you and I met, Brand Builders Group,
Mhm.
to do a webinar on imposter syndrome. They're like, "Just talk live, it'll be real informal, our community will be there." You know, they wrestle with this too.
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, cool. So I did more research and started putting together, yeah, I didn't know it at the time, but like a keynote and a workshop.
Wow.
And it was just like telling my story. And then people that were there like loved it, the audience.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be 45 minutes. I think they asked questions to like 80 minutes in to
Wow.
like wrap it up. And then all of a sudden the word started spreading in that group. And they're like, well, we weren't able to get to the live thing and the 2 week window's open. Can we pay for this course?
Wow.
So, like, they made it into a paid course, and then out of that flowed, a keynote on imposter syndrome where I got tell my story, but also got very clear on the ways I was able to turn it down,
Mm.
and then develop that into a workshop, and then eventually, one-on-one coaching.
That's incredible. What a turnaround for you. I mean, talk about using the very things that we are weak in
Mhm.
to bring such redemption and testimony to who God is. I mean, I just think it's so fascinating that you, on all worldly sense, you had all of these accolades, and yet internally you still weren't totally connected, like aligned. There was so much anxiety there,
Mhm.
that imposter syndrome, and then really that turning around point in your faith, and then really starting to believe in yourself. And I would be curious if you would be so generous. Can you share a couple of things that you were able to start to turn that around, tangible things that you were able to do?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm always happy to share with people is I call it the archive of awesome.
Mm.
And what that is I encourage people to set a timer on their phone for 10 minutes, and they can write it down in a notebook, or if they sign up for my newsletter at johnmollura.com
Yeah.
slash free stuff, they get a fillable PDF emailed right to them, where I say, I'm like, set a timer for 10 minutes and just write down things that you're proud of that you've done throughout your life.
Mm.
And the throughout your life is the important part, because fear doesn't fight fair. Those negative voices in our head don't fight fair. They're gonna, of course, bring up something that you maybe misspoke when your kids were going out the door to school this morning, and make you feel bad about yourself. But that fear and that negative voice will also bring things up from maybe before you can even remember, that families have told you things you've done when you were little.
Mhm.
I always say, look, if fear's not going to fight fair, we're not going to fight fair either. So
Mm.
take 10 minutes and just write down things that you're proud of that you've done maybe today, or maybe you won the Pinewood Derby when you were a Cub Scout when you were 8 years old with a little silver car and you got a bronze medal.
Yeah.
True story. It's actually hanging behind me
That's
next to
awesome.
one of my mission patches. It's right there. I dug it up in a scrap box from my mom. But what that does is, it on those days where like you feel like you don't have it, or you don't, you're going to screw this up, or you're going to be found out, actually looking at like a physical list,
So good.
it's so good. Like, it's something very tangible.
Mhm.
And I always tell people, I'm like, it doesn't have to be something as, monumental as winning a Pinewood Derby when you were a Cub Scout, which is a huge,
Right?
but, like, it could be something like, oh, I figured out how to set my dials correctly to defog my windshield
Right.
today. Like, little wins, and also the big wins, of course.
Yeah.
And that just builds up that database. Like I said, I've mentioned a couple times that, data is the truth.
Yeah.
You can have this actual repository, this archive of awesome things that you've done that you're proud of yourself.
Mhm.
That is what will really help you, change your point of view. It builds that habit of, instead of like, oh, I just did this, I bet something else is going to screw up.
Mm.
If you get used to like, oh, I just did that, something you're proud of, I need to write that down and keep track of that. But like everything, it's a muscle. You gotta practice it.
Yeah. Oh man, you guys go to his website and download that PDF, because and I'm going to. Because something just clicked in my brain as you were sharing that of so I love talking about kingdom identity. I think that's absolutely core of breaking off imposter syndrome, because we actually sit in who we were created to be. And
Hmm.
you aren't created, you can't be an imposter of who you are.
Right.
And so I love writing declarations. But what's interesting that you just made me think a little bit on this is that when I do it, I'm looking forward.
Mm,
It's not actually looking back, which I think we do ourselves a disservice of not actually looking back and seeing, look at what we did. We turned off all the lights today before we left the
right.
house. Or to I noticed my kid today and their eyes lit up. Or I mean, it's almost like practicing gratitude in how we are showing up in life in the past versus
Hmm.
where I've gone with kingdom identity is more present future focused. And then this is such a beautiful tool to have a tangible replay. Like
Yeah.
I just think of, gosh, those commercials right now that are so funny where they throw the flag and they're like, "Do you wanna see that in an instant replay?" Like, I'm calling you out, but
Right.
it's a beautiful calling you out because it's noticing the beautiful things that have occurred and the things that you have achieved. Like you said, even as an 8-year-old, or it could be yesterday. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And one last thing that I'll leave your audience with, I think we're time to land a proverbial plane, is, the archive of awesome is great for building up that database of looking at the amazing things you've done. Maybe you can even find a common thread that you wouldn't have realized if you hadn't taken the time. But obviously, being present is very important. And one of the second things I always like to encourage people to do is, and this goes along with rewiring your brain, is learn to accept a compliment properly. And
Mhm.
I've a patented 3-step process. I'll share it with your listeners. Might want to write this down. It's pretty complicated. The first thing you want to do when someone gives you a compliment is just smile.
Mm.
Like, don't make it awkward and weird and smile weird, but just smile. Just give them a nice smile. The second thing you do, the second step is just say thank you. That's it. Full stop. Not, John, I saw your band play a couple weeks ago. Man, you guys killed it. It's just thank you. It's not thank you. How much beer did you have while you saw us? It's just thank you. And then, the third step is just smile again.
Yeah.
What that does is, we talked about the archive of awesome, building up that basis of that you can do amazing things and you have done amazing things. But when you are able to acknowledge the gift that someone gives you of a compliment, that also rewires your brain of I'm proud of what I just did.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you respond with some kind of self-deprecating remark, or you just pass the compliment on to someone else, what that you're telling your brain is, yeah, no, I really don't believe I deserve that compliment. I'm not worthy of it.
Yeah.
And it also, from the other person's point of view, you're kind of just throwing that compliment back at them.
Yeah.
Not in a good way. Like you just basically said, yeah, thanks for the compliment, but I don't believe you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I say. Just smile, just say thank you. Full stop. It's a full sentence. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then smile again. And it's going to feel really weird.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's going to feel so weird, but just sit with that and just say, oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I'm thinking of my podcasters in both of these scenarios. I think that archive of awesomeness is a beautiful tool to use before you record, like reading over it, or any kind of big interview or webinar that you're launching. That would be an awesome tool to use. And then also when somebody compliments you on an episode, of just saying thank you. That is good and convicting for sure. And I think there is a lot of worthiness tied up in that people can push it off. And I'm sure you unpack a lot of that in how you teach this. So where can people find out more about you, John?
Yeah, I'd love everyone to stop by at johnmollura.com, JohnMollura/free stuff, all one word. So you can click there and sign up for the newsletter and get your archive of awesomeness sent right to you. And just stay up to date with what I'm up to. Don't worry, I'm not organized enough to spam people. So
real. All right. Well, thank you, John. It's been such a pleasure and such an intriguing conversation. And I know a lot of our listeners are resonating, and these tools are going to help them. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity, Kristin. Take care.
Thanks for listening today. Hey, I want you to know that there is an opportunity for you and I to connect. I would love to do that. Find a link below and we can schedule a one-on-one free 15-minute consultation. I want to hear, where are you in your podcasting journey, and how can I help serve you and help you bring that kingdom impact dream into reality?